Key number 3 is using a proven process. So what do I mean by that? As we work with top performers around the world and with small business owners, the one thing we find is that people don't just wing it. They usually have a very, very specific process that they use, and they do it over and over and over again. Let me kind of explain what I mean by that. See this right here? I don't know if you can see this. This is a 3x5 card. Would you all agree that this 3x5 card is a little bit smaller than my head? That it would pretty much be impossible to cut a hole in this 3x5 card large enough to put my head through? Well, let me show you that if you have the right process in place, they can take something that looks virtually impossible to do and, more importantly, be able to do it under pressure with potentially, several hundred people watching you. Can you produce and execute something that's somewhat difficult to do and do it with the pressures on when there's money on the table, when you're in front of a prospect or client? Do you have the right process in place to be able to do that? So I just showed you a moment ago that I had a 3x5 card. And if I've done my process correctly, I can take that 3x5 card and I now have a hole in it large enough to put my head through. Now give me a ooh, give me an ah. All right, now how was I able to do that? Because I had a process in place. And that's really the key to having a process. And that's kind of the reason I wrote the book. It was originally called No Silver Bullet to Selling. Because I used to be asked all the time, hey, GA, what's a silver bullet? What's the one thing I could say that's going to help my customers buy? And I used to think to myself, you know what? There really is no silver bullet. So originally when my brother and I, Paul, wrote the book, the original title was No Silver Bullet to Sales. Because I didn't think there was any magical phrase that you could say at the end of a sales call where the heavens would part, that light would shine down in your prospect, you'd hear that heavenly music, and you would ask a question, they would say, oh, I'll take it. But when we started observing business owners, started observing top performers, we interviewed about 6,000 top performers and customers. We have about 33,000 pages of notes. And it's really a step-by-step process in the book to how do you create success on purpose. And it was really fascinating in doing the research that top performers and top business owners, they don't wing it. They have a very, very specific process in place, and they simply use the process, and they get their team to use the process too. So what are some steps of the process? Step number 1 is pre-call planning. I think the best indicator of the success of any meeting is truly the pre-call planning that happens before the meeting. I mean, think about it. When does your pre-call planning happen? A lot of times I work with organizations, it usually happens on maybe the car ride over or right before they pick up the phone. There's usually very little pre-call planning that happens. And top sales organizations, top customer service organizations, the one thing they systematically now do is they really pre-call plan effectively. An example, early in my sales career with Outsell, I had done a cold call to a financial services organization up in San Francisco. So I flew up the night before. That morning, I walked into the office of this gentleman, sat down with the executive vice president of this broker-dealer, and he had a picture of himself on the wall at the 18th green at Pebble Beach. So I started waxing poetically about who's going to wear the green jacket of the Masters this year, about the Ryder Cup, all kinds of cool stuff. We're having a great meeting. And then he starts talking about, as we got into the business conversation, about the Wilshire 5000. The Wilshire 5000 this, the Wilshire 5000 that. Now, folks, I have my Series 7 license. I know financial services pretty well, but at this time in my sales career, I was unaware of what the Wilshire 5000 was. So I asked a pretty simple question. I said, Tony, I have my Series 7 license. I'm pretty familiar with financial services. I've been working with a lot of financial services organizations. I'm just curious, keep talking about the Wilshire 5000. What's the Wilshire 5000? I'm not familiar with it. Well, he sat back in his chair and he said, whoa, GA, it's obvious you're not ready to start working with our team yet. He stood up, he shook my hand, said, thank you very much and have a great day. And true story, folks, I was out of his office in about 18 minutes. I went back to my hotel. I opened up my computer and I logged onto their website. And what do you think was plastered all over their website? You got it. Some of you are saying it right now. Yeah, the Wilshire 5000. So how long did it take me to look on the website, do a little pre-call planning, and find out that the Wilshire 5000 is simply a different index. Like the S&P 500 has 500 stocks, the Wilshire 5000 has 5,000 stocks. So the meeting was 18 minutes. It took me about 2 minutes to do some plan, to look on the website and find out about the Welsh for 5,000. But how long do you think my call was back to Michael St. Lawrence, the president of Outsell at the time? Yeah, it was a little bit longer than 18 minutes explaining how come I failed at that sales call. So I do believe one of the keys to success is truly pre-call planning. And we have some pre-call planning checklists in the book and also on our website too. The next is really truly building rapport. And once you're sitting down or on the phone or face-to-face with a customer, how do you quickly build rapport? How do you go from preliminary pleasantries into the business conversation? How do you set the agenda? And I think when you sit down with somebody in a sales situation, I think the resistance is pretty high. Would you agree? And the receptivity to your message is kind of low because I think they're afraid that if they give you too much information, they may get sold. So what can you do to quickly reduce that resistance and increase their receptivity to your message? And a lot of it has to do with building rapport and an agenda statement and a credibility statement. And we're not talking about a lot of time. We're talking about 2-3 minutes. But how do you quickly start to build their trust? Then after you do that, you have to have a process that asks the right questions and listen. And having that discovery process where you really understand their current situation, where they want to go, and how, if all, your product or service is going to help them reach their goals. Then after you have a complete understanding of their situation, then you need to present a tailored solution. And it cannot be generic. It needs to be tailored specifically to their needs. And are they going to say, yes, I'll take it every time? I don't think so. It was interesting in working and studying and doing the book and all the research, when it comes to addressing concerns, I thought, as I would ask you, how many concerns do you think customers have? Think about it. If you sit down with the customer, do they have one concern? Do they have, how many in the whole realm of concerns could they possibly come up with? Somebody talking about thousands and infinite. I thought it'd be infinite too. But in doing the research, we realized in about 92% of all sales calls, there was only about 8 total objections. The granddaddy of them all would be cost. It was really about whether, and cost can mean a lot of things. It could be maybe they can't afford it, or maybe you're too much compared to the competition, or cost can mean maybe that they're looking at another proposal, or that they just don't see the value. That's 4 things that cost could possibly mean. Other key concerns may be that they have to talk to somebody else, like their spouse or their partner, or maybe they don't have a need for it, or maybe it's the hassle factor, maybe it's the location. So there's about 8 that really seem to dominate almost every sales call we were on. And here's the really cool thing about these concerns. Folks, I bet if you sat down right now with yourself or with your team and thought through it, you could probably come up with a pretty solid list of what those concerns are before they ever come up. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit. Sit down, take a half hour, try to write out what are the potential concerns, and then have a list of those concerns. And before your next sales call, when you're doing your pre-call planning, ask yourself or your team, all right, what concerns might this prospect have on this call? Then how are we going to overcome those objections? And you can actually practice it. Because folks, when I talk about communication truly being your skill, how many of you out there practice your golf swing, practice playing tennis? But truly, what's the one thing that can make you the most amount of money? It's truly communication. And I think top performers, they practice that over and over again. I recently was on YouTube and watched a video of Rafael Nadal, the #1 tennis player in the world. Think about it. If you lined up 6 billion people in the world, the entire population, and put them in order of their tennis prowess and their tennis skills, Rafael Nadal would be at the head of the list. He'd be #1. The video shows him, somebody with their little handheld camera, up in New York. He's practicing his serve. And he's doing it over and over again with his coach right behind him. The #1 tennis player in the world practicing his serve over and over again with a coach. The thing that was really interesting, though, is when he was doing this. He was doing it about 20 minutes after he just won his last match. He religiously, when he's done with the match, goes and practices for about another 45 minutes. Why? Because his skill is truly playing tennis. The question I have for you is, what is your skill? If it is communicating about your product or service, are you really truly practicing it? So practice the concerns before they ever come up and watch how much easier it is to handle those concerns. And then after you come up with those concerns, you've addressed them, then finally you've got to ask for the order. And I remember when I was early in my sales career and failing miserably, I got some great advice. And my mentor said, Gia, you need to step into the fear. What I mean by that is that at the end of the sales process, if you do it well, closing should be the natural next step. But you've got to ask for the order. If you don't ask for the order, it's not going to happen. And here's what's really interesting too, in working with a lot of top performing salespeople. Think about in your organization, do you have anybody in your team like this? Who has a bigger sales funnel? Top performers or poor performers? And what we find is that usually the middle and poor performers, they usually have a much fuller funnel. And here's why. Top performers, they're doing two things. One is they're asking for the order. And if they ask for the order, the customer either takes it and they get them out of their sales funnel, or the customer says no and they take them out of their sales funnel. Either way, top performers are usually spending the most amount of their time on the highest prospects and their highest clients. Poor performers, middle performers, oftentimes have a very full sales funnel because they're afraid to ask. Because what happens if I ask, they may say no. But here's the thing too, if I have a full sales funnel, I can look at my manager and say, hey boss, look at how busy I am. Look at my sales funnel, look how full it is. Nothing's ever closing, but they have a full sales funnel. So take a look and see, do you have people on your team too who have a very full sales funnel? And it might be because they're afraid to step into the fear. They're afraid to really ask for the order.